the archaeologists, there has been a lot of fraud. No question. I've caught some people in frauds. There has been a lot. So it is hard to sift what's true and what's not. So I can get that part of it, but I also believe that they are trying to cover things up, and the regular archaeologists, they just don't want to be caught in the middle, so they don't want nothing to do with anything that's out of place that goes against the norm. And I spent a lot of weekends searching in this area, and I found the clue. But there was actually 2 clues, and they was both there. And so I was pretty confident that there had to be something there. So I started digging around, and I broke into a cavern. When I find this cavern, I start digging down, and I start seeing that there's soot on the walls coming up. And so I dig down, and I get down about 5 or 6 feet, and I start finding some things. It's not my plan to loot this thing. I want to get in there and video it and share it with everybody. I don't, if these things are really found and people are hiding it, I don't know why they want to hide giants. It makes 0 sense to me. But if they're real, I want to video it, and I want everybody to see this. I want everybody to see this.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, that if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
All right, welcome back to Blurry Creatures. From episode 1, we talked about treasure hunters. That was one of the things that you brought up right in the beginning.
Oh yeah, I mean that
was the first thing you said to me.
Listen,
when we started Blurry Creatures.
I always joke when I grow up I want to be a treasure hunter, and now my dad does too. This is something that we've got our metal detectors.
You're gonna do it.
We've done this, looking for Civil War stuff, and I mean, we grew up in the '80s, right? Everything from Goonies to Indiana Jones, right? We grew up with these things, the idea of treasure hunting, and it was something just like I always was like, I want to do that.
Yeah, and the Ark of the Covenant supposedly been found and being passed around, and all kinds of weird stories. But we got Terry Carter on, right?
Yeah, Terry Carter's joining us. This is something we want to do because Terry is a treasure hunter from Utah, and he's been working for decades as a hobbyist, looking for these purported treasures in the Southwest that really run opposite to the archaeological narrative, to the historical narrative, the things that we're told. So whether it be giants, he spends a lot of time on giants, or evidence for Egyptians or Phoenicians in the Southwest, and we've kind of talked about this sort of roundabout ways. We actually have an episode about an Egyptian tomb being found in the Grand Canyon. But Terry's out there collecting the evidence and going and oftentimes going and looking on the boots on the ground to try to find these legendary troves of treasures, evidence for giants that exist in Utah and across the Southwest.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to have Terry join us.
I love it. I love when we go back to the giant stuff. It's always fun to kind of go back to some of these topics that we kick around. Always find new evidence for the blurry creatures out there. We're not talking to Gary Carter, the old 80s baseball player. We're talking to Terry Carter, for those of you guys. And thank you for supporting the show and the podcast. Thanks for putting us in the studio and helping us kind of live our own dream and keep finding those treasures. If you have anything blurry and weird out there that you want to send us, always info@blurrycreatures.com, whether it's pictures of giant footprints you find in stone or it's stories. I mean, this is you guys fuel the podcast, and family stories, one-of-a-kind stories. I think we are always on the treasure hunt for those one-of-a-kind blurry stories out there. So don't be shy. Send us your story. Let's get Terry on this one. And if you want to support the show and help produce this, blurrycreatures.com/members, become a member of the podcast. Help us make this happen. You make it go. And thankful for all the members who do support the show. Again, that's blurrycreatures.com/members. But let's get Terry on this one and hear about his treasure hunting escapades. We have Terry Carter in the house today. You are a treasure hunter, and you were talking about this pre-roll that you spent most of your time on the infamous Brewer's Cave, looking at lost records, giants, all the things that we talk about on our show. Welcome to Blurry Creatures. Welcome to the basement. Terry Carter, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot? We'll kick this off.
So my thoughts on Bigfoot. First of all, thanks for having me on. But my thoughts on Bigfoot is, I thought that was a myth. I didn't think it was real. I thought as many people that are out there hunting and you've never run into a dead one, and I thought it was a figment of people's imaginations. But I used to do a lot of coyote hunting. I had an old boy tell me, he says, if coyotes had logic, you'd never ever see them. The only thing they have is instinct, but their senses, their keen of smell, sight, hearing is so great that if they did have logic, you'd never ever see them. And he says, you take a lion hunter who's hunting lions with his dogs. That lion hunter, he can take his dogs and run them down a dirt road, and they'll pick up the scent of a lion, and that dirt road might only be 8 foot wide. Well, them dogs can smell the difference from one side of the road to the other side of what's the freshness, and they know which way to go. And I thought, man, that's one heck of a keen sense of smell. And I got thinking, well, if Bigfoot is real, and if he had logic, and he had all them senses, smell, sight, hearing, and all that, you wouldn't see him, you know? And I had another guy tell me that there are way more bears out in the wilderness than there are Bigfoot. I mean, a lot more. And I spent a lot of time out in the mountains, and I've only in my whole entire lifetime seen a couple bears, Right. And I've never ever, I don't know anybody that's found a dead one. And people always say, well, if why aren't they finding dead ones? Well, why don't you find dead bears? And there's way more bears than that, and I ran into a guy named Robert Kreider who did some research for some of the universities, and he was telling me some of the things that the evidence that he came up with, and gave them to some of the credible people that was doing the research, and for some mysterious reason, those evidences disappeared. And I thought, maybe there is something to Bigfoot. I've never seen one. I think maybe I could have smelt one a couple times, but I don't really know. But I don't know.
Bigfoot's like the Ford Platinum. He's got all the bells and whistles. He's got logic, and he's got the senses.
It reminds me, Terry, that if coyotes had any logic, they would probably rule us all. So it's a good thing they don't, right? They seem
yeah.
I love having you on. Like I've said this on the show before, but like when I grew up, I want to be a treasure hunter. Me and my dad.
That was episode 1. He said that.
This is true. I mean, we got our metal detectors, and my dad will be 70 next year, but this is like his dream is to go treasure hunting. So this is quite.
And you found the treasure, Terry. Found. How did you get into Brewer's Cave? What have you found?
Well, it depends on what the treasure is. First of all, man, I'm really starting to like you.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, man.
Hey,
this is fun.
Hey, but before I get into that, man, I want to tell you, a couple of years ago, I worked with this guy who's Kevin Menno. Man, he's your biggest fan out of Twilla, Utah. He told me, you got to listen to the Blurry Creatures, man. I'm telling you got to listen to them guys. So,
shout out to Kevin. Thanks for promoting the show. I love it. I mean, so Terry, you've got a YouTube channel where you talk a lot about the things you've done. I mean, you've got all kinds of stuff: Spanish treasures, Aztec treasure, mysterious vaults, giants, and it's so much in our spaces. We kind of kicked off the show talking about. So, where do you want to start? I mean, first off, how do you get in, and how do you become a full-time treasure hunter? How does this happen for you?
Well, I'm not a full-time treasure hunter. I work full time, man, so that I can enjoy the weekends and treasure hunting, and it's more the treasure is more than just finding, buried Spanish gold, which I'm looking for, Spanish gold bars, but it's more than just that. It's the history, it's meeting the people, it's hearing the stories, all the old timers that I met, that some of the incredible stories that they told is just, that's priceless, and to me, that's a treasure.
That's exactly what we do here at Blurry Creatures, like looking for the odd and the weird, and we talk a lot about giants and specifically like the biblical times of these stories. But it's also awesome to have people who have experienced this stuff in real time today, who they found relics or old stuff that's kind of been buried away that help prove that these other stories are legit. And what you do is you give credence to those other stories, the ancient stories that we talk about. And you've seen things that, like, hey, they were here.
I haven't seen a giant yet, and that's my goal, is to find one. But I've tracked down enough things that you can't convince me that they're not real. And speaking of back to Brewer's Cave, and I don't know if you want to get into that now.
Yeah, give us the background of Brewer's Cave too, so our listeners that don't have any idea of what you're talking about or what that is.
It's springtime. Bigfoot is emerging from his winter hibernation, and it's time to get out yourself and feel that energy, and you need something to get those energy levels ready.
That's right. Time for more outdoor activities, grilling, running around. It's time to refresh your wellness routine, and we've been on this AG1 train for quite some time now. Adding it to our normal routine, I feel more energy, feel like my insides are working better.
Your brother's taking it?
Yeah, I was talking to Jordan about this on this last weekend. We were traveling, so I took AG1 travel packs with me. We were talking about how much we make it part of our daily routine. I add some juice, some palm juice, and a little bit of creatine monohydrate to make the juice for myself in the morning. And it's really been something that almost replaces my morning coffee. Feel better all around.
That's right. And for us ADD kids, we need more focus, and that's what you can do with AG1 if you're like me and your brain's all over the place. And when it comes to your health, you want something you can trust, and that's why we choose AG1. With science-backed ingredients and real benefits you can feel, AG1 makes it easy to support your overall wellness every day, and that's why we've been partnering for AG1 so long. And new subscribers get a free $76 gift when you sign up right now. You get a welcome kit with a free bottle of D3K2. So you're out in the springtime getting that sunshine, but you get a little extra and 5 free travel packs in your first box. How can they get there?
Yeah, so make sure you check out drinkag1.com/blurry for this free offer. That's drinkag1.com/blurry to start your year on a healthier note, Nathan.
That's right.
So Brewer's Cave, back in the 50s, there was this man who collected, back then a lot of people they collected Native American artifacts. They'd raid the graves of these. They were tomb robbers. They were grave robbers. Desecrating the Native American graves and that, and they'd get all these Native American artifacts. Well, he was looking for arrowheads. John Brewer was, and he was building a bust out of arrowheads of an Indian chief. And he was wanting to enter it into the county fair, and he didn't have enough arrowheads to build this bust. So he was asking around where he could find some more arrowheads, and he ran into this one guy that said, hey, when he was a kid, he used to play with the Indians. And he says, over there's an area where the Indians thought it was sacred, but me and some of the Indian kids, we used to play there all the time, a cave, and there's arrowheads there all over the place. So he goes in there and he digs down and he starts finding arrowheads, and then it breaks into a cave, and he starts digging down and finding more arrowheads. And then over a period of a lot of years, I mean, we're talking 10, 15 years, he's excavating and he finds these stairs that goes down and it breaks into a tomb. And excavating into this tomb, he starts finding these ancient records. They were in stone boxes wrapped in cedar bark and smeared with pine pitch. And then he finds 2 large sarcophaguses. The lids were so heavy he had to get some handyman jacks and some pry bars to pry the lids off. And inside were 2 giant mummies, a male and a female. The male had red hair and the female had blonde hair, but they was decked out in gold armor, breastplates, crowns. The one giant had a big sword to the side of him. It was just an incredible story. But when I first found out about this story, I thought that can't be real. I didn't really know about giants. The only thing I knew about giants was in the Bible, David and Goliath. That's the only thing I knew about giants. This was back when I stumbled onto this information. I got into some records that I shouldn't have been able to get into,
right. Yeah.
and it was an accident. And when I seen what was there, man, I spent a lot of money filing these copies of these records, and Brewer's Cave was one of these things. And so it sounded like a great story, but I didn't really know if it's true. I thought, giants, come on. And back then there was no internet. You couldn't go and find things. You had to do interlibrary loans, and slowly I started finding that there were stories about giants, and I thought, well, maybe there could be something to this, so I need to dig into it farther. You know, these records that I got into, it talked about they was trying to get John Brewer to show him where this cavern was, and it had a list of all the people that were involved and befriended him and trying to get things in to get something going. John Brewer, he wanted people to know what he found, but he didn't want people to take it from him, you know, and I can understand that. And everybody's wanting him to show him where it's at, and he doesn't want to show it where it's at, where people where it's at. So this brings in the Mormon Church, and that's where I got this stuff from. You know, anything that the Mormons thought had to deal with their Book of Mormon, they was on it right now, and I guess giants are part of maybe their religion. Ancient records are part of their religion, and any thing that they thought had to prove that, they wanted to know about it, but they wanted to keep it hush hush. And I got into some of them records accidentally, and I thought this was a fairy tale, you know. But I started tracking down all the people that were involved that were still alive, and I came across one of these boxes that came out of this tomb of giants. I came across one of these stone boxes that was wrapped in cedar bark, and it's smeared with pine pitch, and inside of it was 5 copper plates with these ancient looking writings and pictures on it. And I thought, well, that ought to be easy to prove if this thing's real or not. You know, we can carbon date this box or this bark. So we had it tested. I formed a group called the Ancient Historical Research Foundation, and we had this bark carbon dated. And when the carbon dating came back, it came back at 2500 BC. And the people that was doing the carbon dating, they knew this thing was going to come back as a fraud, as modern, plus or minus baseline 250 years, base or plus or minus. You know, they knew that was going to happen. But when it came back to 2500 BC, they was shocked, so they figured they screwed up. So they ran the test 10 times, and 10 times it came back to 2500 BC. Well, they got doing some research because some of the other things that they was carbon dating come back older than what they thought it should be. And so they got checking, and they did screw up. They ran out of the solution that they was used to calibrate, that they had calibrated to their machine. And so when they got a new solution, they didn't calibrate their machine to that. So when they recalibrated it, the date became between 50 and 350 BC was what the official date was. Now, when I got that date, I thought, man, there's got to be something to this story.
I mean, where did you come across this box? Was it through finding these names? Or where is this box now? Where is all this stuff?
Yeah.
John Brewer written a letter to the Mormon Church saying, hey, I found this stuff. What do you think? Well, the Mormon Church goes in there, and they sent a guy in there to track this down and see if he thought, you know, this was a true story or not. Well, John Brewer, he gave this box to this professor. And the professor ended up having a heart attack and dying. But before he had a heart attack and died, he gave it to one of his associates. And nobody knew that he gave it to that associate. Nobody really knew that box was around. But when I started contacting people, and really I was contacting people on other things. I was contacting people about what I found I call the mystery glyphs. They're a form of they're like a hieroglyph that's neatly and painstakingly carved onto these stone cliff walls scattered throughout the western United States in remote locations. And when I went to talk to this guy about the mystery glyphs, he says, well, you're probably here to see the stone box. And I go, I didn't know you had a stone box. So it was one of these people on these lists that I accidentally stumbled on that he had it.
Where's that now?
Yeah.
The professor's wife, she found out that this guy had it, and she asked for it back. And so she got it back, and then somebody coming out offered her $1,200 for it. And she thought, man, it was a sign from God or something, because she became the pianist in her church, but she didn't have a piano to practice on, and a new piano was going to cost her $1,200. So she sold it to this guy for $1,200. So
Is the cedar from here, or is the cedar
from Lebanon?
From Lebanon, yeah.
So, man, I always say cedar bark, but it was really juniper bark, and yeah, it was from here. So,
okay.
What I was going to guess, Terry, is I know the Mormon Church does this. I know that they will confiscate items like these things, and then there's a vault. I actually have a buddy who was part of the Mormon Church and has had access to the vault and seen some crazy stuff he claims inside the Mormon Church vault, things that relics and whatnot they've collected, and sort of in the same way that I think that the Vatican does this with relics, the Mormon Church does the same thing. So you guys get this tested. I'm going to go through the story. You find it's BC. This came out of Brewer's Cave. Do you know where Brewer's Cave is? Have you been there? Is there still stuff purportedly in the cave? Because what happens to the sarcophagi? What happens to these giant mummies and the things that John Brewer claims to have found in all his time?
A lot of things happened, Brigham Young University found out about Brewer's Cave, and they went pressuring him. And Brigham Young University is ran by the Mormon Church. Well, The Mormon Church was in there talking to Brewer, and Brigham Young University found out it, and so they started demanding things. Well, they ended up with some artifacts and stuffs, and they came out and said that this stuff was fraud. And then a newspaper guy got a hold of this, and they wrote a big newspaper article saying that John Brewer was a fraud and this is all bogus. Well, the church, the BYU didn't know that the church was in there. The church didn't know that BYU was in there. And when that happened, when that newspaper article came out, John Brewer shut the whole thing down. He broke ties off of everybody. And then he took his boy in to see this cave, because when that newspaper article came out, everybody was ridiculing him. Everybody was ridiculing the family. It became a big wreck for the family. It destroyed their lives. And so he took his boy into this cave to show him, hey, this cave is real. And that night, his boy went to a church dance, and he never came home from the church dance. And the story that I get was that they found him 3 days later in his car, and there was a hose rammed from the tailpipe into the window, and he carbon monoxide. They ruled it suicide. Well, John Brewer didn't believe that was suicide, so he took the car. When he got it back, he took the hose and he put it inside the car, and he put some rabbits inside the car, and he wanted to see how long it would take to kill the rabbits. Well, the muffler got so hot that it melted the hose before it killed the rabbits. So when that happened, John Brewer figured somebody killed his boy. Now, that's his story. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's his story. When that happened, he sealed the whole thing up. He dynamited it shut. That was it. He denied that it ever happened, and that was the end of that. So,
have you been out looking for the cave? Are people still looking for it today?
I ended up in some of these things. I ended up with John Brewer's diary, and I don't believe it was his full diary. I think it was just a partial diary that he wrote down. I think he changed some things so that to give to this professor, to let this professor know that he was telling the truth. And you can read in this diary that he's troubled, thinking that he's got something that's super religious, and he's thinking about selling it, making a lot of money, and then he's thinking he's getting punished for having them thoughts of trying to get rich off of religious artifacts. And so I had everything. I tracked down some of these people that he talked to in this diary, and everything that he said in this diary that he dealt with these people was true. He did. He gave this diary to this professor in confidence, and somebody broke in and snuck it and took it. And then I found it later after the professor had passed away. He didn't want people knowing about that, so he denied that this was his diary, but everything matched up. So I took everything from this diary, all the evidences, all the clues that was in these files. I went and talked to everybody that was involved, and I put together where I thought it had to be, and I went looking, and there was a clue there was a clue that the old gentleman that told Brewer where the cave was to get the arrowheads. He had a neighbor, Maud Cox. Maud Cox was went to the fair and seen that Indian bust that John Brewer had built out of the arrowheads, and she commented to George Keller, and she says, "Man, did you see that bust that John Brewer made out of them Indian arrowheads? It was pretty cool." Well, George Keller says, "Well, yeah, I'm the one that told him where to get those arrowheads. It's over there." And I'm not going to tell you guys what that clue is, but right. I found that clue in a journal. This story written by, when Maud Cox was interviewed, I found that somebody wrote that down in their notes when they was tracking this down. So I figured where it was at, and I went searching, and I spent a lot of weekends searching in this area, and I found the clue. But there was actually two clues, and they was both there. And so I was pretty confident that there had to be something there. So I started digging around, and I broke into a cavern. And I started digging down inside this cavern, and I found, first I found some carpet in there, about 2 foot deep underneath the dirt.
So it's been filled in a couple times, because it sounds like the first time it was filled in, and then he was digging in there, and then it's filled in again.
So you found carpet.
Yeah.
So it's not ancient carpet from 350 BC.
No, it's not ancient carpet, and that carpet means something, and I'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I guess I need to back up. I'm fast tracking to make this go faster. I guess.
No. Me and Nate are on our way out to see you in Utah. We're coming.
So it's been discovered. It's been discovered by John Brewer back in the day. He was a young guy. They dug up a bunch of stuff. Mormon Church comes along, and then you think you get the journal, and you look, and you find it again.
I think I found it again, until it's broken in, and we find these ancient giants in stone sarcophaguses and ancient records. It's just me thinking I know where it's at.
Right.
But a lot of things line up. Well, back in the day, John Brewer, he's worried that somebody's going to find this cave, and when he's inside there, he noticed that there's a hole going up into the ceiling in this tomb. And some of the stuff that I got, he has a drawing of what this tomb looks inside. He shows the steps. He shows there's this death trap at the bottom of these steps, and probably he's, I don't know how far down this hole goes into the ground, but I'm sure at one time it was covered with sticks and dirt and stuff, so that somebody not knowing going down to the bottom and they hit that last step, they're going to fall to their death. Or there was a little side tunnel that they could go around, Well, yeah. That death trap was sprung, there was nothing covering it, but there was a hole going up into the ceiling right kind of above it. And so he went up above and he started digging down. He had to dig down about 5 foot, and he connected these two holes. So now he's got a 30-foot shaft before it drops into the room. And so he dynamites shut the original entrance because he doesn't want anybody seeing it. But he's still got all that long hallway, the stairs and all that. So when he's excavating, rather than try and haul the dirt up this 30-foot shaft, he's just taking it and dumping it into the stairway, into the hallway that he'd excavated out in the first place. So when I find this cavern, I start digging down, and I start seeing that there's soot on the walls coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dig down, and I get down about 5 or 6 feet, and I start finding some things. He talks about in his journal, he talks about these candles. This is in the 50s, and he's saying, I wonder if old man so-and-so at the grocery store knows why I'm buying all these candles every day, So I start finding old candles. I start finding old tools. I found some zip cord for a dynamite fuse. And so I'm thinking, this has got to be it. Well, I get down about 5 or 6 feet, and I see this little crack about 1 to 2 inches, that goes through, and I shine my light down there, and I can see that there's soot on the ceiling, and it's coming up the walls, and I'm thinking, this has got to be it, So this was back in the day when this was before, digital film, digital cameras. This was back before I had to try and videotape, and I had to get a push pull camera, and it ran on 12 volts. So I had to get an old TV with a VHS tape deck hooked to it, and I had to haul a car battery up there to power up the TV and the push-pull camera, and so that I could record this. And I'm shoving this in there, trying to see what I can see, and I'm seeing some fiber stuffs and things like that. And so I spent some time, and I finally had to get help. I couldn't do it by myself. The entrance into this was so narrow that as you're crawling on your belly for about 10 feet, your back's hitting the ceiling, and your stomach's right tight on the ground.
No,
you
thanks.
know? And so I get some help, and we get a little sled, and I got one person pulling it out and dumping it, and I got a rope to pull it back in, and I got a little teeny bucket because I'm not making a very big hole because I need to hide this up so other people can't find it. And so I'm digging with a little trowel, and I'm putting it in a little bucket, and I send it up, and they dump it into the sled, and man, it's taken a long time, but I think this is Brewer's Cave, but I want to know for sure. If this is really Brewer's Cave, there has to be a shaft. And so I got a guy with ground penetrating radar, and we go up there, and we're looking for the shaft, and we find the shaft on the ground penetrating radar. But the shaft is collapsed in. So that's no longer a way. What John Brewer would do was he'd put a board down under it, the shaft, cover it up with some dirt, brush it off so nobody knew he was there. He'd tie a rope to a tree, drop down in, come back out, cover it up. And he only went there at night, but he spent a lot of time there at night. He didn't have a great family life with his wife, and so he spent a lot of time in this cave digging, and we're talking a lot of years. So
yeah.
So he was just going nonstop, and he finds these sarcophagi with a male and a female giant. Do you know how big those giants were? And then where are these copper plates?
The male was 8 foot, or the woman was 8'9", and the man was 9'8".
Wow. Big boys.
So, that's a big WNBA player.
Yeah. What are in these copper plates? Where is their location? And anyone figure out what they was written on these things?
So the linguists tried to make heads or tails of it, and that's one of the reasons that they said John Brewer was a fraud, because they couldn't make heads or tails of it,
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, well, it must be a fraud. But you got to understand that these people, these professionals, there's a narrative out there what history is, and if they go beyond that narrative, they're jeopardizing their career. So none of them really want to put credence to there was ancient records in the Americas before Columbus. There was, none of them want to stick their neck out onto that, And I had a guy tell me that he talked to the archaeologist and says, "Hey man, if I found some gold blades, if I found some things that are out of place artifacts, I'm going to bury them up, and I'm not going to report them because I don't want my name tied to it any way, shape, or form." Right. And I've talked to two individuals. One was an anthropologist student, and he was on a dig, and he found something, an out-of-place artifact, and he thought, this is pretty cool. And they went and took it to record it into the books for that dig, and they wouldn't record it into the books. They says, it's a one-off, it doesn't fit the narrative, we're not going to record it. And I had another guy tell me the exact same thing. He was on a dig, and he went deeper than what he was supposed to go, and he found an out-of-place artifact, and the exact same thing happened. They got mad at him for digging too deep, and they wouldn't enter it into the records. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. They saying it doesn't fit the time period, it doesn't fit the narrative. Well, who knows what that artifact came from, where it was? Did these guys find it from another ancient civilization? And if we keep records of all this stuff, it's going to paint a picture rather than just throwing it out and throwing it away and destroying history?
Well, I mean, we hear these stories all the time on our show, just kind of the rewriting of history. But this whole cave activity, Lovelock Cave, things like that. It's there's also the stories of the Grand Canyon. They're finding the same stuff in the Grand Canyon.
Egyptian stuff in the Grand Canyon,
yeah. So I mean, this is the part of the country where this stuff, comes out of. You got Nevada, Utah. You've got just this hot spot, and obviously there's a lot of blurry activity that goes on there on the surface. But what is going on in this part of the world? And so you're going down. You get into this place. You think you found Brewer's Cave. What are you finding? You find anything new?
So I found a tunnel. I was following the smoke. It was definitely, whether it was Brewer or somebody had a fire in there that was making smoke onto the soot onto the ceiling of this this cave, And but when I took the guy with ground penetrating radar, man, where I was going didn't line up with where the Brewer's map was, his drawing of the room. It didn't line up with the drawing of the room, and it didn't line up with where the shaft should have been and what he drew on his drawing. And so I started digging in another area, and I started finding the same thing, and I started finding evidences of somebody else had been there digging before me, shoring up with boards and things like that. Well, I thought, I need to file a mining claim or something on this so that I can take control of this and find out what's going on. Well, I find out that the property was private, and then it got bought by the Fish and Game, and it was turned into a wildlife preserve unit. And I got researching, and a wildlife preserve unit, you can't file a mining claim. You can't even put a shovel in the ground without getting in trouble. So I got a lawyer who was a friend out of Arizona, and we contacted the lawyer who helped draft the antiquities laws for Utah. And we put him under lawyer-client confidentiality, and my lawyer being a mediary between me and him, and I talked with him, but we shielded my name, and we shielded what exactly we told him kind of what we was doing, but we didn't say where. And he told me, Terry, you just as well sell drugs, because when you get caught, you're going to prison just the same.
Wow.
So, that scared me. I don't want to go to prison,
Yeah.
And so I've been, everything's halted when I found that I can't do anything when the Fish and Game bought it, and it blocked me from doing anything. So I've had an archaeologist help me contact the Fish and Game and contact, we told them what we have, and first they wanted to know where it was at. Well, you tell us where that's at. Well, I'm not going to tell them where it's at. I don't care. It's not my plan to loot this thing. I want to get in there and video it and share it with everybody. I don't, if these things are really found and people are hiding it, I don't know why why they want to hide giants. It makes zero sense to me. But if they're real, I want to video it, and I want everybody to see this, So we contact the Fish and Game, and they say, well, first off, we gotta get the permission from the Utes and the Paiutes because of the NAGPRA laws and that the repatriation acts, And so we start contacting the Paiutes and the Utes, and we're trying to work with them and see, and they don't want their people dug up, and I can understand that, their graves of their people have been desecrated, and you can only study so many indigenous people, and why do you need to dig up more? And I can understand that 100%. But this isn't this isn't the Native Americans. This is something else, and this is something that needs to be studied, So we're trying to work with them and see if we can't make some headways. And then all of a sudden the Fish and Game says, nope, no matter what, we're just not going to let you do any digging. So I don't know where I'm at. I'm blocked, stalemated. I think I know where it's at. But until it's broken into and found out, everything lines up. It's just me thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the story, the endless story we've had on our show. We hear all the time. Smithsonian comes, where's the bones? We've even sold a lot of shirts with that. We made a joke about it, but they don't want the giants. They don't want this whole narrative to come out. And we've said many times on our show, we've looked at the giant topic every way we can. You know, and there was times in history, like in Catalina Island, this guy has an actual giant museum. He's been digging these things up. There's certain places where these giants ended up, and for a while, this stuff was on display. You could go, you could see this all in many places around the world, or around the United States, actually.
Terry, we interviewed a guy. This reminds me so much of what you're saying. Who had a mound on his property. He was a farmer in Minnesota. And he was digging into it and found giant bones. This is his story. And so he calls the authorities and says, I found bones, giant bones. And the government shows up, and the same thing. It's a NAGPRA. They say, oh, this is Native American. Can't dig this up. Got to fill it back in. And if you do, you're going to jail. But he's saying he has giant femur bones sticking out of this mound that he was accidentally dug into as he was trying to get fill dirt, etc. And ends up having a serpent mound on his property. This is a whole crazy story, but it sounds very much the same. And also reminds me of that story, purportedly where people found an Egyptian tomb or Egyptian-like tomb in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, that area now is fenced off. It's government property.
Well, yeah. Do you think that's a big part of the national parks, is to protect certain areas that are...
You know, that's what some people say. They say that they've made national parks, they've made wildlife refuges, they've made wilderness study areas, they've done geological study areas, all to shut down people. I had some people tell me that every time that they had something of interest that they wanted to go check out, that there was something of interest that was out of place, not your regular mainstream history, there was some reason you couldn't go in there, you couldn't do anything, whether it was, any of that stuff.
I'm trying to get a guy to come on the show right now that was in Utah digging. His grandfather and his friend found these preserved half goat, satyr-looking things, and he's sending some photos of them. He's trying to track down the guy who took the photos, and he's still alive. But, this there was an era, Terry, from I would say the 40s to the 70s when you could dig for this stuff, you could find this stuff. Obviously the newspaper archive stopped around the 40s. They stopped printing that the farmers were discovering giants in America. But, until some of these stories, they seem to dry up around the 70s and the 80s. But a lot of, I think the last sort of rumbling of them was around then. Is that what you found?
And there's all kinds of stories out there, and you hear you see all the newspaper articles, and they say, well, that was just sensationalized newspaper article reporting, and all of them, I can maybe see every one of them, and then when you get in the congressional reports for the Smithsonian, and their people themselves are saying they've got large skeletons they've dug up, and they're saying, oh man, they wasn't really qualified to, they shouldn't have made that report. They didn't know what they was talking about. They wasn't really giant.
Hey Terry, so you're based in Utah, right? That's where you're sort of okay. A couple questions, what else have you tracked down that's been discovered in that Utah area, and what in all of that in your mind is rewriting your idea of the history of the Southwest? Because like Nate had said, right, you've got Brewer's Cave, and John Brewer reportedly found giants. Lovelock Cave has a ton of lore from the Native Americans about giants living in the cave. They smoked them out. There used to be stuff on display. There was a museum. There was giant bones in that museum until somewhat recent history.
Yeah.
What else are you hearing, or what are people finding that's breaking the narrative in your area as far as what we can just consider to be the traditional archaeological narrative about our history here in the United States?
So I was talking about these mystery glyphs that I've been tracking down scattered throughout the western United States. Well, I started finding out there was some Egyptian artifacts found by some of these. And one of these sites was Pocatello, Idaho, which is not far from where I live, 2-3 hours. Back in 1918, near one of these mystery glyph sites, there was this young girl. She found this rock. It was carved. You could see it had been ground and carved into the shape and size of a chicken egg. And it had some markings on it, and they just thought it was Native American markings on it. Well, this young girl kept it all her life. And when she became older, she had terminal cancer, and her great granddaughter was over there visiting, and she was rummaging through her things, and she found this old rock that she'd found, and she gave it to the great granddaughter. The great granddaughter kept it all her life because it was something special given to her by a great grandmother just before she passed away. Well, in the 70s, King Tut's tomb was making its rounds. The exhibit was making its rounds through the United States, and the Smithsonian Magazine did an article on it, on King Tut's tomb. And this lady, she's older now. She's sitting in the dentist office, and she's reading this article about King Tut's tomb, and she gets noticing that on King Tut's sarcophagus, there's some markings on his sarcophagus that's the exact same markings on this egg that her grandmother had given her. So she takes it, she's in California, she takes it to the University of Berkeley, and they authenticate that it's a piece of alabaster from Egypt, and it has King Tut's high priest signature on one side and the cartouche of his name on the other. Now, this rock was found in 1918, but they didn't break into King Tut's tomb until 1922. They didn't really know who he was until 1922. How did that happen? And then I got a call from a guy in Colorado. There was a site of these mystery glyphs near Durango, Colorado. And I got a contact from a guy, and he wanted to talk to me. And I thought he wanted to talk to me about some mystery glyphs he found. When I got with him and started talking to him, he shows me this rock that he found, and it's carved to be looking like an Egyptian scarab, and it's got Egyptian hieroglyphs on it. And he found it when he was a kid in the 50s, near where he lived. There was a knoll with a depression in it, and he was up there playing on that knoll with his dog, and he found this thing. And so I took a picture of this thing, and I posted it to some antiquities dealers for Egyptian antiquities dealers. And the first guy says, "Man, this is an obvious fraud. It's crudely written." And then a bunch of antiquities dealers, hold on. They says, "This thing is like a magician's amulet, and it wouldn't be written by the pharaohs, the priests, and all that, who had perfect, writing skills and all that. This is a magician's amulet, and not only that, it has Tutmos III's name on this thing. So who knows about that? And there's been some artifacts, found throughout that just doesn't fit the narrative, but we never hear about them because they're dismissed, right. They're discarded, they're called as fraud. Speaking of the Grand Canyon, I had a friend, I was talking to him about these mystery glyphs. He says, "Well, man, me and my family was down to Lake Powell, and we had a houseboat, and we went clear up into this, as far as we go into this canyon, and we camped for the night there in the houseboat, and then we got up and took a walk, and we come across these strange writings, and we took our family photo in front of him. He says, 'Man, what do you think this is?' And he showed me a picture of them. They look like they're Egyptian. That's down in Lake Powell. Lake Powell's made out of the Colorado River, which flows through the Grand Canyon." And I'm thinking to myself, well, if the Grand Canyon Egyptians or Oriental people or whoever they were is true, it would make sense there would be more of them farther down the river. So yeah. The Lake Powell is dropped a long ways, and so what took him not very long to get to, if it drops 100 feet, that's miles, as the slope of the hill and the mountain goes. And I've tried to find that, and I haven't been able to find it. But one trip I was down there, we did some research, and we found that there was another girl who found another one of these Egyptian hieroglyph-looking sites 30 miles away from the one we're looking for. So I thought, man, we got to find this and see if there's any evidences that anything went on there, or it could be some college professor, Egyptologist went there, boating and spend a long time, because these carvings there are a lot to them. He could have wrote in Egyptian hieroglyphs. Me and my family came here, to Lake Powell and had a great time. I don't know, but I need to find these so that we can explore and see if there's something more to it, if it's hooked to the Grand Canyon or not.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think it takes a long time to kind of to understand that they would want to suppress all this information because, like you said, it kind of rewrites history, it rewrites American history, and it kind of gives a lot of, credibility to the stories in the Bible and other things. It just kind of launches things into a different space. I mean, you have Pyramid Lake there. There's supposedly a pyramid there in that area. I mean, this is like, I wonder if the terrain, kind of hot, deserty, was something that they'd come from. So they kind of liked this area particularly to sort of settle and build. And obviously it's hot in the summer, but it's a great place year round. A lot of the snowbirds and types of people would go there. So I wonder if the weather was an attractant to some of these giant beings that would go around that area and build stuff. And
well, I don't know if it's that or if the climate has changed.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think is the climate has changed because, in that area you have, they call them the Anasazis, all these cliff dwellers and all that, it's barren. There's no water. It's hot. It's, the climate had to have changed, and
you think it was like a nice lush area, a lot of water, maybe stuff grew there at some point.
I think it's possible. I think it's possible. I mean, not far where I live, it's kind of a deserty area, and they're finding all kinds of not only dinosaurs but turtles. I mean, they find all these. You can see when you hike high in the mountains, you see seashells. You see, high up in the mountains. At one time, I think I think there was a huge lake here in Utah, Lake Bonneville, and some cataclysm happened and an earthquake or something, and it broke a natural dam, and all the water's drained out. And I think that helped change the climate. Maybe I don't know.
Well, the implications are interesting, Terry, because we talk a lot about the conquest of the Holy Land by Joshua, right? Where there was this diaspora of giants that were, as the Bible tells Joshua, they were hunting down and they were eradicating the giants from the Holy Land. And when you marry that story with what is found in the United States, giant mounds, and the Native American lore, there's tons of Native American lore about giants in North America and them battling giants, whether it be the story of yellow hair that we did on one of our episodes, or the idea that much of these mound places that are attributed to Native Americans, the tribes themselves will tell you that they found them. They didn't build them, right? This isn't their lore, but it's been sort of whitewashed as
or even ancient, different time period.
Yeah, but the implications there's Egyptian hieroglyphs and giants in the Southwest is fascinating because we've hypothesized that perhaps the Phoenicians being the seafaring people of the ancient times, there's a lot of evidence the Phoenicians made it to North America.
Well, yeah, I do think you're right about the weather and the water because there was probably a lot more water. They sailed into the Ohio Valley, they say, and they even say like Rockwall, Texas might have been a huge port where they came in. They built like a megalithic city in Texas where they could have come in. I think America was probably half covered with water, and they had these different ports all over the place in ancient times where they came through. So, yeah, it's easy to think about it now, what the landscape is, but if you kind of go back, and now I'm reminded of some of the stories we've heard, there's probably a lot more water and access points to different parts of America where they would build things and have a reason to build there specifically. What's the most interesting thing you've discovered, Terry? Like what's sort of like your opus as a treasure hunter?
I haven't found what I'm looking for, Spanish gold bars or a giant, but the mystery glyphs, when I stumbled onto one of them sites that wasn't known about, and they didn't know about a lot of these, that was a treasure to me, to find these neatly carved hieroglyphs high in the cliffs of the mountains east of Provo, Utah, and then when I started tracking them down, there was only 12 known sites that had been known about before that, and then I teamed up with some other people, and we've expanded that to there's 39 sites of these scattered throughout the Western United States. That was special to me. But other than that, I've found little things here and there, but not really what I'm looking for. But
Are you just on Google Earth all day looking for spots to go and check out, Terry?
You know, I don't do that. I hear us, and I should do that because there's a lot of cool things found on Google Earth, you know?
Yeah.
I don't do that. I hear a story and I track down certain things, and I spend a lot of time. You know, I spent a lot of time on Brewer's Cave. I'm still spending a lot of time, you know, and most of that time is fruitless. It doesn't pan out anything, you know, tracking down leads, you know. A lot of that time, you know, 99% of your time is not productive at all, you know. So
right. Well, I think about Oak Island, right? That's one of my parents' favorite shows, and I love the Oak Island, but you know, they spent so much time looking. That's why it's called hunting, right? It's not finding all the time. You spend the vast majority. It's like the Israelites in the desert in the time of Moses. It's like they're 40 years out there, but you just get the highlights of the things that happened. It's not the mundane of looking, tracking, digging, finding nothing.
But it's hard because you can't tell people where you're looking, where you're going, but you also want to tell people where you're going, where you're looking. You're not going to Brewer's Cave anymore, you know, at night, you know, and we know like the desire in you is to keep looking, keep finding. So do people slip you information? Hey, you should check this out, and you go, and like, do you bring anybody with you? How do you?
Yeah, all the time I get like I just got the other day, I had a guy contact me, and he told me that his uncle, when he was a kid, was and this is in the Kanab area in Utah, and there is stories of giants being found in the Kanab area in Utah. And so when his uncle, when he was a kid, they was out riding horses, herding cows or something, but they seen something strange. They hiked up into a cliff, got into an area, and they seen these giants sitting around in a circle in this cliff, and it spooked them. They left. Well, he told his brother, which was this kid's dad, where it was at, and so he went to go. They tried going on tote goats, and they didn't have enough gas to get there on tote goats. So then his dad passed away, but before his dad passed away, his dad gave him the map, this guy the map, and told him the story, told him where it's all at. It's got it pinpointed and everything. So he just contacted me the other day. So we're planning a trip to there, but in the exact same area. As near as I can tell, I had a guy tell me when he was a kid, he found a giant skull, and they called the authorities in, and they roped the thing off, wouldn't let him in. And this was back in the 60s. They wouldn't let him in. He thought it would be big news. He thought it'd be all over the newspapers. Not a word was said. They wouldn't even let him go up. He was the kid that found it, and he says that they dug the whole thing up and carted it away, and not a word was ever said. Well, this where he found this skeleton, where this guy's telling me he's got the map too from his dad, from his brother, is the exact same area. So I'm pretty excited to go check that out, you know. And then I had a guy contact me that from California. He's in the Mojave Desert, and he spent a lifetime up there searching things, and he found a lava tube catacomb that he broke into, and he found a room of giants in crystal sarcophaguses. He says they looked like they was just sleeping. And then he says next to them was another room with all these little people in it, mummies and little tools. And I'm thinking, you know, this is crazy. This sounds, are these guys on drugs or what, you know? But no. The more you talk to these people, these guys really believe the story that they're telling me. And so
that sounds a lot like Mount Shasta, Terry. Have you heard the story of J.C. Brown in Mount Shasta finding?
And there's a set of mystery glyphs there near Mount Shasta.
Mount Shasta is bizarro. Yeah, I love these stories. Well, I was gonna say, like, we've been doing this for 5 years, Terry. Maybe I can think of like 4 or 5 things that people have sent us that feel like the first time this story or this picture of something gets out, and you probably have to sift through a ton of stuff to find the good things. I remember someone sent us this photo. It was a giant footprint that came out of a quarry in Montana, and it was amazing. There was like 5 photos of it, and this footprint was 22 inches. They even measured it and sent it to us. We tried to buy it off of them, but someone had already purchased this whole slab, and they wouldn't sell the footprint. But it was clear as day, giant footprint in stone. Like I said, that goat man story, this guy sent us this photo of this, definitely a 70s photo of these fossilized, like satyr-looking goat things that they found in a cave. And, someone sent us photos of these skulls that were dug up in New Mexico on this guy's property. But every single time, these people don't want to come on our podcast and tell their story. They don't want the publicity. They don't want to get shut down. It's the same thing where you don't want people coming out on their property. And so even 5 years of our treasure hunting, we've only found a handful of like what I would say are original stories that feel, but it's all the same as what you're describing. It's in this vein. Giants were here. And I think the numbers are insane. The amount of people who found these on their farms and hills, there must have been a lot of giants in America for random people in the 70s, 60s still finding them. I think there were a lot here. I think there's still a lot you can find. I think you're going to find them, Terry. That's what I'm saying.
I hope you do.
I hope you're right. That'd be cool just to see, to know that they're real, And I think the reason you don't have as many newspaper articles about them as you did was back then, like I said, people, that's what they did for a hobby. They looted Native American tombs. That's what they was doing. They'd dig up the pots and stuffs and sell them to museums or sell them to tourists or whatever. That's what they did. That doesn't happen anymore. And that's why I don't think you're getting as many dug up. But yeah.
Also, I think these places have been sort of, as you talked about the Fish and Game, they've been legally sort of cordoned off, so you can't go. Right?
Yeah.
I had a question. I want to go back to the mystery glyphs real quick. You said you found 39 locations.
Yeah.
Have you translated? They don't be able to translate any of these glyphs yet, so we don't have any idea what they say. Or is anyone working on translating, trying to figure out what these are? And the secondary question: is it the same? Does it appear to be the same type of glyph, or are you getting sort of variations in maybe what you would consider to be linguistics, like a different maybe not the same same handwriting, but not the same message perhaps, but like the same language? Does it look to be the same?
It's the exact same language. It's the exact same. What it is a form of pictorial language, and it resembles closely with what the Ojibwa say is the pictorial language of the ancients. And Chief Copway, who he was the chief of the Ojibwa Nation, he wrote a book in 1850 talking about the Ojibwa Nation, and he shows this ancient pictorial language that was only known by the medicine men or whoever, and it was a form of communication between all tribes. And he shows this, and he talks about also in this book, he talks about that they have there was a group of in their tribe, there was a group of these braves that were the most trusted braves in the whole clan, and they was to guard these ancient sacred records that was passed down since the time of the flood. And what they would do is they had a cedar tree that was hollowed out. They filled it with goose down, and they threw these ancient records in there where they was on slate, birch bark, silver, copper, and then they smeared the whole thing with pine pitch, like Brewer's boxes were, and then they buried them. And then every 10 or 15 years, they would dig them up, and I can't remember, 10 or 15 of these wise men that was in charge of these. And they would dig them up, do their ceremonies. They would go over what everything meant, because it was passed down for over 100 generations, he said, the translation of these. And he says, the white man thinks we can't keep an oral tradition. And no, he says, man, this was committed to these guys to know exactly what each one of these said. And they had to repeat it over and over. And one of these guys died off. They brought a new one in, and he had to learn it. In these records that they would pull out, every now some of them would deteriorate, like the birch bark ones would, and it was written in this hieroglyphic pictorial language like the mystery glyphs. They would make an exact replica, and then they would split the old one, the birch bark, and give it to each one of them that was there in the council there, and for their medicine bags or whatever they did, Well, Chief Copway, he was the chief of the Ojibwa Nation, and he never knew a thing about these ancient records. He never knew a thing about this writing until his uncle's best friend, who is one of these watchers, told him about it. But the thing that interested me about that story was, one, the ancient records, the hiding them in a cedar bark smeared with pine pitch to waterproof it. But that language was the pictorial language. That's these mystery glyphs. These mystery glyphs, tracking them down, you go to them, and some of them you can see had been refreshed, recarved, And I'm thinking, I'm wondering if this is part of that same ceremony that's passed down for 100 generations, and you got somebody watching these, instead of being on birch bark slate and all that, they're on these stone cliff walls, and somebody is refreshing them. And then over time, you got the Indian Wars, you got the Native Americans dying of smallpox and things like that, and these things were lost. The history of these things was lost. I wonder if this is part of that. But I don't know. People are trying to interpret them. People are saying, they're coming up with different theories. Whether them theories are right, it's just a theory. We'll never know till we find a smoking gun. We'll never know.
That's wild.
How many eras of, obviously things have been here, then died off and buried, and then comes back. I mean, how old do you think some of these ancient giants might have been, and when were they here in America? Have you put together any kind of timeline in your mind of how old this stuff is?
So I really haven't tried to track down, the history of the giants, how old they are and all that. I just wanted to know if they were real, because I wanted to know for Brewer's Cave, So I've got an interest in it. I got an interest in anything that the academia says that isn't real, didn't happen, that there wasn't continental travel before Columbus. I want to know about that stuff, because I don't know.
Definitely
I want to, if it's real, I want to know if it's real or not. And to go along with the archaeologists, there has been a lot of fraud. No question. Yeah. I've caught some people in frauds. There has been a lot. So it is hard to sift what's true and what's not. So I can get that part of it, but I also believe that they are trying to cover things up. And the regular archaeologists, they just don't want to be caught in the middle. So they don't want nothing to do with anything that's out of place that goes against the norm.
Yeah, they just toe the company line. Let me just say, so am I correct in you think that the mystery glyphs are connected to the tablets found in Brewer's Cave? That these are the same?
No.
No.
Those are a different type of writing. Those are connected, I think, with the tablets that the Ojibwa had, they said was passed down for over 100 generations, and was given to them by the wise man after the time of the flood. In fact, Chief Copway says every Indian tribe got a set of these records. He specifically says even the tribes out west got a copy of these records.
It sounds a lot like what we hear. Graham Hancock famously has this whole narrative about post-flood. These enlightened travelers show up and they teach people civilization. It sounds a lot like when we look at the Bible. It's like the Watchers. It's these angels show up and they impart knowledge to humanity. And I think it's a fascinating idea that if this is if that oral tradition is true and that really happened, that you have this passing of knowledge and written down, like Watcher knowledge, if you will, that makes it down through the generations. And then, you're tracking down being, these alternative history stories that line up with what we see in the biblical narrative, and also line up with the existence of giants, and that there's this ancient knowledge that was passed down and recorded in stone or recorded on tablets. I think it's so interesting. It makes me want to come out to Utah and hang out, Terry, and go put a shovel
vast.
in the dirt.
You're looking at like a whole. It's a lot of area to explore. What's the next exploration? It's one of my last questions. Like what's up next? What are you going to go look and trying to find?
This kid that contacted me that has this map to where this cave of giants are. That highly interests me. So that's on the radar. There's so much. I have a hard time I have to work for a living to pay for my hobby. You know? So when I have a free time, I have to pick and choose, what I want to go for. And there's so much stuff on the plate and so much things on the back burner that I even forget about. And I got to go back through my notes and say, oh yeah, man, I need to do some more tracking down on that thing. So, but I think my next venture is go and try and find this cavern of giants with this guy, and now's the perfect time. It's not too hot, not too cold. So
yeah, Terry, if you need a couple of dummies that can probably do a little bit of manual labor, let us know.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah, we're always on the trail ourselves here, at trying to find these things. And we talked, like I said, early on in the show we talked a lot about giants, and we've said a lot of times that we've looked at it from every angle we can. Whether they've dug up giant bones, the language of the giants, any sort of clue that would give to the existence of these things. And like we found, it's like Sasquatch stories. There's a bunch of different stories. It sounds like there's a whole world of these things, different types. I'm sure there were many ancient giants living there with different languages, different time periods, right? Maybe some of these were pre-flood, post-flood. I mean, it could be a huge span of time, and you're digging up stuff from different eras, and you can't connect the dots. I don't think it was a one and done quick era of American history. I think there was a history before a history before a history here, and it's cool that you're out still on the trail finding these things. But yeah, like Luke said, we're always down for adventures.
Yeah,
if you ever want to,
we'll come, Terry. We'll fly ourselves out to Utah. But hey, so appreciate you spending time with us and would love for you to have a chance to tell everybody listening to our show, like, where I know you have a YouTube page, a pretty big YouTube page where you go through a lot of these things, but tell people where they can find what you're working on and follow your adventures, Terry.
So you can check out my YouTube channel. It's just Terry Carter Treasure Hunter on YouTube. Look for the pirate skull and crossbones with a patch on his eye, and then on Facebook also Terry L. Carter. So
we'll have our listeners also send you some
you need more stuff sent to you.
If you have a cave on your property with some giants in it, we know where to go. You know who to call. But
thank you, Terry.
Yeah, thanks, Terry.
Well, hey,
appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Great to meet you, man. I love what you're doing. I'm slightly jealous that in your free time you get to treasure hunting. I think someday I'd like to do the same. So
come on out to Utah. We'll have a great time.
Let's do it. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Terry.
We'll do it. Thanks, Terry.
Hey,
appreciate it.
Have a good one.